And I'd like to thank the Belgian One Health Network, the Prezod Initiative and the Czech Presidency of the EU for partnering with us on this event. And the aim of this reception is really to provide an opportunity for us all to meet together, share information on how we can prevent pandemics like COVID from happening again. And we're specifically going to discuss how we can avoid pathogen spillover from wildlife to humans, which is known as pandemic prevention at source. And this event is very timely because of discussions that have begun under the World Health Organization on a new international instrument to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. So during COVID, we did get used to having a lot of hybrid and online events, and I'm afraid this one is also no exception because we have a number of very high-level speakers who couldn't be with us today in person, but who are going to be joining us via video message. So we're going to hear from them, and our first video message is from Ms. Zakia Khattabi, who is the Belgian Federal Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and the Green Deal.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the Wildlife Conservation Society for organizing this event on One Health and pandemic prevention and for inviting me to express my thoughts on this important topic. As Minister of the Environment, let me first stress that prevention is a fundamental concept which has been enshrined in international environmental and European law for a long time. It is founded on the idea that prevention is better than cure. If we want to protect our environment, our health, but also our economy, it is necessary to adopt a preventive approach rather than just resorting to curative measures. The latter often come at high environmental, societal and economic costs and often do not allow for full remediation. This logic needs to be followed in the upcoming international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response that is being negotiated under the auspice of the World Health Organization. Belgium has already emphasized multiple times that equity should be at the heart of the new instrument and that it should contain key obligations regarding prevention, early detection and early intervention. Note that equity is not only emphasized as a moral position, but also as a pragmatic and essential part of prevention. As a strong advocate of the One World, One Health principle, which reaffirms the link between the health of people, animals and environment, I am pleased to note the growing recognition of the need to address the root causes of pandemics. If we want to avoid long-term environmental damage and increasing health risks such as new pandemics, there is no other option than to strongly increase our investment in a prevention strategy aimed at tackling the human encroachment into nature. Scientific studies show that spillover events where pathogens jump from animals to humans are becoming increasingly frequent due to human actions such as deforestation, land use change or wildlife trade. The overexploitation and destruction of nature comes at heavy costs. As has been said in the Lancet Planetary Health, COVID-19 wasn't just a rare event, but a symptom of ecological disruption. Scientific research is essential, and we need to improve synergies between research and operational agendas on zoonoses emergence, climate change, biodiversity loss, and industrial agricultural production. This will be key in understanding the evolutionary dynamic of pathogens, the complex host-pathogen interactions, and the prevention of environmental and health problems. One World, One Health is therefore at the core of my political agenda. Enhancing and protecting biodiversity, preventing environmental pollution, fighting antimicrobial resistance and realizing a just transition have been given a high priority. Belgium, for example, joined the international Prezod initiative aiming at preventing the re-emergence of zoonotic diseases using a One World, One Health perspective. By combining research projects and operational actions, Prezod is innovative and complementary on the international scene. The project prefigures a paradigm shift on how to tackle emerging risks. Its bottom-up and participatory approach provides an important lever of action in regions where the risk of emergence of infectious diseases is higher, while protecting global environmental, human and animal health. High-level discussions at global level, including on the future pandemics instrument, should better integrate and reflect the One World, One Health approach in order to set out efficient and long-term international One Health policies. The COVID-19 crisis should inspire us to do better in the future. It has clearly demonstrated that humans are not only part of nature, but that we rely on it for our survival, health and well-being. There is a transversal need for action across policy sectors. We need to search for a synergistic coexistence between human and natural ecosystems. We have only one world, one health. Thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure to contribute to this event.
And we'll move straight away to the next video message, which is from Ms. Stéphanie Sédou, who is the French Ambassador for Global Health.
Ladies and gentlemen, bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous. I am delighted to speak to you today. I thank the Wildlife Conservation Society, the Belgian One Health Network, the Prézord Initiative and the Czech Republic for organizing this event, which gives us the opportunity to discuss how the One Health approach can help us prevent future pandemics. The conference you're holding today is directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic that is still affecting the world, despite our common efforts to tackle it. In response to the COVID-19, France followed a clear and consistent path. First, supporting multilateralism, solidarity, and international coordination, since only multilateral action can address such an unprecedented and multidimensional crisis. This implies giving a central place to the World Health Organization. Secondly, through a rapid and strong contribution to that response, both politically and financially, in order to ensure equitable access to COVID tools. And finally, drawing the first lessons of the crisis in order to strengthen the international health architecture and make sure that we are better prepared to face future threats, in particular, prevention. Amongst these lessons, one of the most forceful ones is the reminder that human, animal, and environmental health are vitally interconnected. Indeed, we know that 70% of emerging diseases are zoonotic. We also know that human activities are damaging biodiversity in a globalized world and are risk factors for spillover. Identifying those risk factors may be the key to prevent future pandemics. This is why the effective implementation of the One Health approach is no longer only a priority, it is the only way to go. And it is a solution, a lifesaver, bringing together all relevant sectors, disciplines, and communities to promote well-being, protect our planet, and address future health emergencies. France has been concretely using the One Health approach to fight against antimicrobial resistance, AMR, since 2016. Our country has been implemented a roadmap to tackle antimicrobial resistance, and we have reached interesting results. The overall consumption of antibiotics in human health in France has decreased by 12% between 2018 and 2020. And in the last 9 years, the use of antibiotics in veterinary medicine has decreased by 45% in all animal sectors combined. Fighting AMR should therefore rely on prevention, urging everyone to have responsible and prudent use of antimicrobials while preventing people and animals from catching infectious diseases. That is why France, alongside European partners, among which Belgium and the Czech Republic, was involved in the JAMRAI program, the Joint Action on Antimicrobial Resistance and Healthcare-Associated Infections, which aimed at developing and implementing effective European One Health policies to tackle AMR threats. AMR was also the core of the declaration presented last March by the trio presidency of the Council of the European Union, France, the Czech Republic, and Sweden. In order to strengthen the One Health approach at the international level, France, with the support of Germany, also initiated the creation of the One Health high-level panel of experts, thanks to the leadership of the quadripartite partners, the WHO, the World Health Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and the United Nations Environment Programme. The PRESODE International Initiative applies the higher-level panel definition to the prevention of emerging diseases. It was launched by President Emmanuel Macron during the One Planet Summit for Biodiversity held last year and will network both research work and operational actions to prevent the risk of zoonotic emergencies and pandemic. The aim of PRESODE is to build on what already exists, to improve collaboration, strengthen synergies, and to promote exchange of information and best practices. We collectively need to avoid the risk of vertical responses. PRESODE is a powerful and well-designed way to achieve this goal, to join our forces against zoonotic disease emergence. That is why I'm delighted that Belgium became the second European member of PRESODE, and I would be even more delighted if the Czech Republic could also join us. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion.
And lastly, but by no means least, we do have a video message on behalf of the Czech presidency from Mr. Ladislav Miko, and he is the advisor.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear
Sorry, he is the advisor to the Czech Minister of Environment and Special Envoy for International Negotiations, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, it's my privilege to welcome you at the reception on One Health and Pandemic Prevention on behalf of the Czech Presidency to the Council of the European Union. One of the key tasks of our presidency, as you know, is to lead the European Union and its member states at the UN Biodiversity Conference, which will be held in Montreal in December this year, and which will finally, as I hope, adopt the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. It is our joint responsibility that the new framework is ambitious and comprehensive and trigger urgent and transformative action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. As confirmed by Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in 2019, Global Assessment Report, the state of biodiversity and ecosystem services continue worsening worldwide at unprecedented rate, with consequences to human health and well-being. The health of our planet is intrinsically linked to our own survival. We are dependent on biodiversity and well-functioning ecosystems as they boost our resilience and prevent the emergence and spread of diseases. The need to further promote and implement the One Health approach is therefore more urgent than ever. In this regard, I highly appreciate that this event aims at the promoting of the One Health approach, namely in the context of pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a harsh lesson by causing great loss of human life, as well as serious disruptions to our societies and economies. We need to ensure that our governments and all sectors of society are better equipped to prevent future outbreaks with pandemic potential and to respond to them. We have to increase our resilience. This need has been confirmed by the member states of the World Health Organization, who have agreed on developing a new international instrument to strengthen the pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, just as we have learned that the impacts of such pandemics as COVID-19 are of the global dimension. We have to work together at an international community and to apply equitable and whole of society approach if we want to tackle future outbreaks. Quoting once again the findings by IPBES, governance that supports the involvement of multiple sectors at varying levels of society in decision-making can limit risk from zoonotic diseases and provide positive ecological and social outcomes. I am confident that this event will provide an excellent opportunity to present pandemic prevention at source in more detail and will allow for fruitful discussion. I wish you a pleasant and enriching evening. Thank you for your attention.
I think you've all heard that there's a lot of strong support for this issue at high political levels, and I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, Dr. Sue Lieberman, who will be talking a bit more about what can be done at a technical level and a policy level to prevent pandemics at source.
I probably don't need the microphone, do I, people in the back? This will probably be too loud, but you're recording it. Is this all right in the back? Or it's not too loud in the front? Thank you, and thank you all for joining us this evening. My title is Vice President, International Policy for the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I coordinate with what our incredible colleagues do around the world with multilateral systems, with treaties, agreements, etc. I don't know if you can see that or if there's too much glare, but better to look at that than me. Some of you know WCS, and that's great. I'm not going to talk a long time. You've watched 3 videos. We need to talk amongst ourselves, but a few remarks. WCS is a global conservation organization. Some of you know that already. We work to save wildlife and wild places through science, conservation action, and education, and we have field programs and offices in more than 60 countries. In Asia, Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific. Very small office here in Brussels, even smaller in London where I live. The majority of our work is in the field, and working with government partners, indigenous peoples, local communities, etc., hands-on conservation. We are the only international conservation organization with an embedded health program. In case you wonder, why am I, trained as a wildlife biologist, talking to you about health? Our health program is recognized for excellence in zoological and wildlife medicine, pathology, and science. I'd like to share with you that in October 2019, we hosted a conference jointly with the German Federal Foreign Office, quote, on One Planet, One Health, One Future. We brought together academia, government, policy, civil society, and we forged the Berlin Principles on One Health that you may be familiar with. And we said at the time, in October 2019, that if nothing changed, particularly on the human-wildlife interface, there could be a major pandemic of zoonotic origin affecting everyone on Earth. I wish we'd been wrong, but it was not a surprise that it happened. The question is, will we do everything to make sure it doesn't happen again? Will we learn from this pandemic? We know more than we did before COVID-19. There must be improvements, of course, we agree, in surveillance, preparedness, healthcare infrastructure, vaccine availability, vaccine equity. But we believe very strongly that all efforts must be made to prevent the outbreak in the first place. This must entail what we're calling prevention at source. At that interface between people and wildlife, there are 8 billion globally interconnected people on our planet. We cannot manage wildlife, use wildlife, or relate to nature the way we did 300, 200, 100 years ago. And science really, to us at WCS, shows us the way. We must work to eliminate and reduce the human-wildlife interface to prevent that spillover of novel pathogens from wildlife to people. It's not about surveillance and seeing if bats or rats get sick. They don't get sick. It's when people have contact, the pathogens spill over, species are mixed, viral evolution takes place, and occasionally, not always, then that pathogen is something that can be transmitted from person to person. We need to work on person-to-person transmission, but we do know how to prevent that spillover in the first place. Number 1, we need to eliminate deforestation and forest degradation, particularly in high biodiversity, high integrity forests. That's key. If a road goes through a forest, people have access to the wildlife, people are exposed to novel pathogens. Some of you are health experts, you're standing there thinking, we know this, you know this, but do governments know it, and it is part of their governance or their legislation or their action is a different issue. In addition, our science shows that large markets and trade into markets in live and freshly slaughtered wildlife, particularly birds and mammals, need to close. Particularly those urban commercial markets where consumption of wildlife is a luxury. It's not part of food security. Also, there's not enough wildlife to go around for the local people who live in the people who live in the forest anyhow. But the point is, those markets where you have concentrations of people, mixing of species stacked in boxes and crates and cages, are a wonderful experiment in viral evolution. We have to stop those experiments and stop the spillover. Achieving this stopping pathogen spillover, preventing outbreaks in the first place, really is the most cost-effective and effective way to prevent viruses and other pathogens in wildlife from spilling over to people or livestock or other animals. Many governments are taking strong action now. China has closed its markets, for example. But this is a transnational problem that requires a global solution. But as we've heard, there's no unified multilateral vehicle to implement a coordinated global One Health response. Different countries are looking at it differently. And we've heard just last December, it was pretty fast in the world of multilateral negotiations, the World Health Assembly agreed to kickstart a global process to draft a negotiation of a convention, agreement, or international instrument. If I say agreement, I also mean convention or international instrument. There are all sorts of legal discussions. But the point is, this will be under the Constitution of the WHO to strengthen pandemic prevention as well as preparedness and response. And we believe this agreement or instrument is key to a global commitment to prevent pathogen spillover and will be something that then can be used to provide the technical and other assistance to those countries who want to make this transition. And we do appreciate the support of the EU and its member states in this effort, but it is really critical that the word gets to the negotiators, gets to WHO, that yes, preparedness, response are critical, but prevention at source has to be a priority. It's just going to save many more lives and global economies if we prevent these pandemics and the pathogen spillover in the first place. And we all look forward to discussing with you how prevention at source can be prioritized. We've submitted input into the WHO process, and we'd be glad to share that with any of you if you leave your email. WHO is not the easiest forum to deal with, but now we have been accepted as a relevant stakeholder under Annex E, if you know WHO. And we're now, if you don't, you can ignore what I just said. The point is we're now able to comment, and there are only 2 conservation organizations that are approved by WHO. In conclusion, we have to repair our broken relationship with nature. That's what brought us to this point on COVID-19 and brought us to the current biodiversity crisis and the current climate change crisis. We can't go back in time and prevent the current pandemic, but we can work to prevent COVID-23, 24, or 25. And I'm always reminded of that old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So let's all work together on that ounce of prevention. Thank you very much.
So we deliberately tried to keep this, the speeches shorter so that we have more time for questions. So if anybody has any questions for Sue, please do raise your hand, and then also let us know your name and the organisation you represent. So any questions? Sorry, we've only got one microphone.
Okay.
It's okay. I was also fascinated by the publication, I believe it was Nature, where the link was put between biodiversity and zoonosis. But I have to say, when I'm at Cienzano, and Cienzano is the Public Health Institute in Belgium with the One Health approach as part of their mission, they're a little bit skeptical towards this link between the two, because they say, well, the less animals, the less zoonoses. So what we see is the underlying factor is what you also mentioned, is a demographic problem. And you also mentioned we cannot be in relation to nature like 200-300 years ago. I think we cannot even be in relation to nature like 30 years ago, because we were 3 billion and now we are almost 8. So in fact, it's a very demographic problem. So I wonder whether we tackle the problem from the right angle, if we focus too much on the link between biodiversity and zoonose, whether we should not come back to the old problem, which we already had identified at international level, the demographic problem. So basically, very rudimentary, contain humans to certain spots. Okay, but you know, underlyingly, that's one of the big driving factors of the problem. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on this one.
I may have a lot of personal opinions on that. That's certainly not what the Wildlife Conservation Society works on. But we need to have healthy functioning ecosystems with healthy functioning populations of wildlife for biodiversity, but also for climate change mitigation. Absolutely critical. Are there too many people? Yes, but it's not only, the risk of pathogen spillover is not only in the countries with the fastest population growth, not necessarily. Countries in Latin America, for example, all ban having live wildlife markets for food. Is it a perfect enforcement? No, not at all. But there's opportunities, since they have the governance systems in place, to work with them to at least improve that enforcement. Do we also, from a biodiversity and climate perspective, need to look not only at, if you say demographics, population increase, but also consumption? Populations, per person consumption, per person footprint, where population growth may be slower in Europe, North America, but per person our footprint is much worse than people whose populations may be increasing more quickly. So there's a complex answer. We need to work on biodiversity conservation. We need to stop unsustainable use, illegal use, but in addition we need to deal with this interface between people and wildlife. And I have heard from health people who say, we can never prevent it. But you can, we can. We actually do know how to prevent at least that contact between people, at least birds and mammals, where there's the greatest risk. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it was very good answers, because I will take them back to...
Okay, I'm happy to dialogue more on that with you. Anyone else? I'm going to break my neck here. Thanks, Hilde.
It's a very short question, but knowing
Introduce
that...
yourself.
I'm Hilde Eggermont, I'm the coordinator of the Belgian Biodiversity Platform. Knowing that these multilateral environmental agreements often fail, or we spend a lot of time negotiating and nothing happens, do you really believe that this can be a game changer, or do you think this could also distract attention from the real action, from where we should act on, or what do you think?
Well, my first answer is yes, I think it is absolutely critical. There are biodiversity agreements that are effective, and they have compliance measures, and they have measures that can be used for countries to report, and there are actions and compliance. Those that just say to countries, do good, we all agree we're going to do good stuff, do good things, but there's no compliance measures, there's no reporting, there's no accountability. So I believe that this can be effective and can help countries at least have a level playing field and commit to do something that then donor governments, donor philanthropy can provide assistance as needed. But there have to be accountability and compliance measures as well. Otherwise, it's just governments agreeing, yeah, we'll do all this, and then there's no accountability if they don't. So my answer to you is, yes, I think it's critical, and they've agreed now to work out this, to have an agreement by the end of 2024, which I think is pretty ambitious, actually. But we're hoping that it can also, in addition to be prioritizing prevention at source, also have some accountability and compliance measures as well. Do you want to take any other questions? You're welcome. I don't want to keep you away from the bar or the snacks. We're all here to answer questions and chat.
Anyone else? Well, in that case, I was going to introduce Dr. Hilde Eggermont to give the closing remarks, but she's just
herself.
nicely introduced herself. But I'll pass the mic to you, Hilde.
Thank you. I will just try to summarize a little bit what the speakers have just said. First of all, thank you to all of you. I think your voices are well heard, and I'll just try to summarize in a few key take-home messages. So I think this event indeed is re-highlighting the necessity to prevent pandemics at source, really preventing the spillovers from animals to humans in the first place. It seems indeed that this is one of the most effective ways to prevent these spillovers. But it also means that we need to scale up efforts for nature restoration, for biodiversity protection worldwide, but also take measures for unsustainable exploitation, including also in high biodiversity regions. And there is the call, I heard it loud and clear, that any instrument that is now being developed under WHO emphasizes this component. We also heard that the One Health approach and equity should be central stage. Equity in both access to the tools that are needed to prevent the pandemics, but also access to healthcare for all people, as well as these global and integrated solutions, these multilateral agreements. And although they can be complementary, focus should be on prevention, not on curative measures. And finally, we also heard that about the need to tightly link up research with the more operational agendas, and that these bottom-up approaches should be complemented by higher level inputs by this political dimension. And in that sense, the process for developing a possible new accord is providing some great opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement, also including state and non-state actors, even the private sector, civil society, and others. So from my side, that's it. I would like to thank the speakers, WCS, Prizode, the Belgian One Health Network, as well as the Czech presidency. I do hope that they become a member of Prizode. I can voice the message. And I think we can just continue over the reception. So thanks a lot.